It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Okay, Harley has a question. He says, the wife and I are 24 and we are on step 4 of the FOO. We are currently at 2 months of emergency savings. We're homeowners and they're thinking about beefing that up. So how do they decide if they are more of the 6 months of living expenses emergency fund people or the 3 months of expenses?
Love it. Love it. Love it. Yeah. So what Harley's alluding to is we say that as you're determining an appropriate emergency fund for someone in the buildings phase, in the wealth accumulation stage, it's often your emergency fund is somewhere between 3 months of living expenses and 6 months of living expenses. Now, when you get later on in life and when you get into financial independence and you get into retirement, even your emergency fund changes. You should probably have somewhere between 18 to 24 months of expenses in readily available capital. But while you're still building, while you are still growing your empire, the answer is 3 to 6. And so his question is, well, how do I know where we fall? What are the things I ought to think about to figure out, am I closer to a 3 month or am I closer to a 6 month?
Everybody's going to be very individualized, but here's the variables that impact this. First of all, how fast could you replace your job? And be honest with yourself. Don't, because I mean, we all like to walk around with our chests all puffed out and be like, man, I am so important. But as we can see in this downturn, you're starting to see the cracks form where unemployment likely will go up because there's a lot of people that probably thought they were going to be so protected or they're such good employees that they don't have to worry about losing their job that right now are worried about losing their job. So be honest with yourself and say, how fast could I replace my job? And assume, by the way, when you're trying to handicap where that falls, is it 2 months, 3 months, 4 months? Think about that the rest of the world is burning too, because it's going to be a bad time when this all happens. Because remember, all of these volatility, job losses, market downturns, they're all extroverts. They all love to hang out and they close down the parties. So you want to make sure that you have all those things accounted for. So that's the first thing. Handicap, how long will it take you to get your job with honest eyes? The second variable is how many people in the house work. If you and your spouse work, that actually mitigates a lot of risk because the chance of both of you losing your job is less than you just one single breadwinner losing their job. So you can actually use that to put the needle closer to 3 months versus 6 months. So those two things are the big variables that you got to make sure you understand. How long will it take to replace my job? How many income sources? And then you can even take into account if you have been investing long enough. Say you're in the latter steps of the financial order of operations because you're maybe in your 40s and you now have passive income. I say passive because there's no such thing really as passive except for maybe a portfolio. But maybe you have rent coming in from real estate or other things. You can take that into account in your decision, but you've got to really go worst case scenario. How do I make sure when it really is raining outside that I'm going to be protected?
And there are seasons of life, and I think this is okay, where the necessity of your emergency fund might adjust. You might, when you're an early on young person, early on in your career, 3 months might very well get the job done. But then you start having some kids and life gets crazy and you get pulled in all these different directions. You might need to be 6 months. But then your kids get older and they start getting out of the house and you're building up other portfolio assets elsewhere and you don't have as many draws on your income. Well, then maybe you come back down to 3 months. It is sort of a life cycle of assessing where you are at this present time and this present moment. And just because it's 3 months right now doesn't mean that it's going to be 3 months for your entire financial life, and the same thing with 6 months. So make an accurate estimate of where you are right now today.